Hey everyone, about 4 months ago I posted a video on how I personalized my kayak fishing crate, and at that time I promised to post another video on how I build the rod holders and also the navigation light. But about a month and a half ago I did post a video on the navigation light, so today I'd like to focus on the rod holders. Also at that time I said I was going to post another video on how I put the rod holders on the type of kayak or crate that you'd find at Home Depot and Yak Attack and some of those, and Menards. So I did that and I built that crate, and I'll show you that one in a second here. This is more of a heavy-duty crate, and this is the type that you find at Yak Attack, Home Depot. I got this particular one at Menards. So I built this very similar to what many people do out on the internet. I made a top by cutting off the bottom part of the kayak crate, put it on here, and I have a little segment on that in just a little bit. And this one's for my grandson. So it's heavier duty. It's got smaller holes in the bottom, so you don't have to worry about things falling through. It's just a nice crate. So with my grandson, he fishes mainly with bait casters. So I made this with 2 bait casting reels and 1 spinning reel. He typically takes 1 spinning reel that he uses like for bluegills, or if he has some areas he needs like a finesse type bait, he'll use an ultralight there. That goes in here. And if we go muskie fishing, then what it do is we'll swap this out and they'll put in the rod holder for the muskie. So what I'm going to do now is going to go through the steps that I needed to build the rod holder. In my previous video, I pointed out that I made 2 different style rod holders. One designed for bait casters, and that is notched out in the back for the thumb hook, and then the front for the reel. And then the spinning reel holder. And this one is just notched in the front where the spinning reel drops in. Now I'll show you in just a second here. As you can see, this is set up, tapered just right, so when it drops in, the rod is locked in place. You don't have to worry about this flopping around. A lot of the commercial crate style rod holders just have the 1 notch, and what will happen is they'll spin around like this, and when you try to open the lid on the kayak crate, it hits. So this is much better. It locks in place. And again, most of the rod holders that are out there are designed for spinning reels, and they just drop in like this. Now that's not to say there aren't good rod holders out there. There's some great track mounted ones that are Yak Attack, Yak Gear, Railblazer. They're all really, really good rod holders, but they're very expensive. But for the cheaper or less expensive crate mounted ones, this is the standard. So today, when we talk about the rod holders, what I'm going to be doing is talking primarily about making this style. And I have a template that I'll be showing you. And the template is set up for both openings. So if you're only going to make the spinning rod holders, all you do is cut out this section and leave this intact. So it's the same style template. The difference is that you only cut 1 part out for the spinning rod and both parts out for the bait caster. Okay, here are the materials that you'll need to make the rod holders. The next step in the process is to cut the offset board for the rod holders. It's a matter of cutting off a section of the 3/4 inch PVC board, locating the places for the holes, and drilling them with a 1 1/4 or 1 1/2 inch hole saw. Okay, the next step in the process is to rip this board right down the center here, and that way you'll end up with 2 pieces like this. And these will be the main supports for the rod holder. Okay, this is a tricky process. It's safe as long as you use a push stick. Next, I created a template that shows what parts have to be cut out on the 1.5 inch PVC to make the rod holders. If you're doing a spinning rod, you'd only cut out that center 3/4 inch piece, and if you're doing a bait caster, you do both sections. After creating the template, then it's a matter of cutting it out and then putting it together, and I like to use painter's tape because it won't damage the paper template. Slide it on the 1/4 inch PVC pipe and line it up. Okay, again, once you have the template lined up, then it's a matter of tracing the opening. I like to use a Sharpie. Now that you have it all traced out, it's just a matter of removing the template and then cutting out this portion here with a hacksaw. The next step is to flare the end of the rod holder. And what you'll need for that would be a heat source, such as a heat gun or a torch, the PVC pipe, of course, and the one that you've already drawn the template on, and a bottle. I find a beer bottle works just great. To start by heating it, I recommend putting it on the edge of a bench and rolling it so you can heat it evenly all the way around. Now once it starts to become pliable, then turn off your heat gun, set it aside, and take the beer bottle and slide it in and just slowly twist to give it a little bit flare. Now what I'm not going to show here is that I'm going to take the pipe now that it has a flare in it, take it in and then pour cold water over top of it and after it's been flared. As you can see, there's not much of it flared, just a little bit. And this is more than adequate in my opinion. Before I cut out the portion for the spinning rod, what I do is I locate an area that is in center and with a 3/4 inch spade bit, and then I cut this, drill this, so the lower half will be cut out in a 3/4 inch circle, and then I'll cut the other pieces out. But before I start, I'm going to drill a pilot hole here for the spade bit because they tend to wander a bit. So once the pilot hole is cut, then I'm going to use the spade bit to cut this opening. Now I'm going to cut this one section out here on both sides for the spinning rod. Next, I'll need to file this area just to smooth it out. You want to repeat the same process on the other side. And because there's an angle here, I recommend cutting the straight line first and then cutting this angle afterwards. So I'm going to cut right down here. Okay, once you have the lower portions cut off, then what you want to do is cut through the bottom here. And be very careful and just cut down to the lines that are cut out previously. Once you get close, you may have to break this out a little bit here. There. Now it's a matter of just cleaning this up with a file. Next, it's time to cut these angles. Keep in mind these are rough cuts and these will have to be filed to take off rough edges. Now that's it, except for doing the filing to smooth it off. What I also like to do is round the edges a little bit so it's not quite as harsh. When you're putting the rod in, you don't want to hit any of these rough edges. So, now you get the idea. Okay, so now we're going to install the rod holders on this crate. Again, this is the type of crate that you'd find at Menards and Home Depot. As you notice here, on this particular crate at the bottom, there's an opening here. And this is probably overkill. In fact, I know it's overkill because that's just my nature. What I did is decided to put a piece of 3/8 inch deck trim on here. Again, this is a synthetic material, so it's not going to warp when it gets wet. And of course, the kayak, it's going to get wet. Anyway, this has two dimples here. And so what I did is I cut or drilled a hole in the back of this just in about 1/4 inch, and just so it'd mount right in here so it locks in place. And again, this is probably isn't necessary, but I wanted to put this in just to make sure that I didn't over compress the wing nuts bolts and collapse it. So this is just again a safety factor. So next what I'm going to do is make the alignment. So next then I'm going to put the rod holders in place here and just kind of get it lined up. And then what I'm going to do is mark the location to drill the holes. I'm going to use a Sharpie pin and I'm going to mark it here. Again, I'll do some fine tuning here before I drill the holes. When I started building the rod holders, I found that I had a little bit of trouble. Now you notice on the rod holders there's two holes that are different diameters. This hole on this end here is 3/8 inch, and it's designed so that you could put the machine through here and get a screwdriver in, but not so large that it would pull through the backside. Well, originally I was drilling these by hand, and as you might guess here, you can see extra holes here. Well, what happened is the drill bits I've used are very aggressive, so I was carefully trying to drill a hole through here, and not only did I go through here, but it also kept going and went all through the back, so I had to drill another set of holes. Not so good, but anyway. So what I did is I designed this little simple cradle here, and this I put on my drill press. And I set the drill press so it only allows you to go partially in, so you don't have to worry about going all the way through again. This is a real simple thing, and if you build a lot of rod holders, I'd really advise you to do this. Again, it's simple. The drill press works great. The cradle is even better. Okay, the final step in the process after everything's been laid out, the holes have been drilled, and again, just a reminder here, larger diameter hole on this side and a small on the other. Then it's a matter of assembling it. You'll notice that I rounded the edges on the supports as well. This is cosmetic. I just don't like sharp corners. It's just a little more convenient. Anyway, it's a matter of taking the machine screw, dropping it through, and then assembling it. Now I'm going to turn it sideways just a second, but what I'm going to do is assemble it, and I'm going to use a fender washer on the back side just to make sure I don't collapse the plastic. Okay, the crate is finally done. I have all three rod holders installed, and the lid here is secured in place with a small bungee cord. Then on top I added a net. This is a motorcycle cargo net, and this is so that my grandson can store his plastics in the top here, or whatever else he wants to store in here. The lid is secured in place with 3 cable ties. I added a piece of paracord to make sure that the lid doesn't fall too far open. 3 rod holders in place. I added split rings on all 4 corners here and carabiners, and this will allow the kayak crate to be secured to the kayak. Okay, that's it for this crate. Okay, this is my crate, and as I mentioned before, this is a little different design. The rod holders are secured a little bit differently with this one. Instead of using the fender washers and bolts, I use wing nuts and a small piece of aluminum that goes across the opening here. It secures it in place nicely. But again, the other crate is much heavier duty. This is a little larger as well. Okay, as I mentioned before, when we go muskie fishing, my grandson and I will swap out one of the rod holders for a muskie rod holder. You remember I mentioned this before. It's a little larger design, and this will accommodate the large handle of a muskie rod. This is my crate in place here. You can see the muskie rod holder up front, bait caster and spinning reel. It's secured in place with carabiners and these split rings on the sides, and it's attached to this elastic cord here on my kayak. It works great. Okay, here's my grandson's crate in the back of the kayak. As you see, I don't have a second bait caster, but it is set up for three rods, bait caster, spinning, another bait caster. Now again, if we were going muskie fishing, we'd probably swap this out and put the muskie rod holder in here. Again, it's secured in place with carabiners. This is a heavier duty unit, so it's actually a little nicer than mine. And that's it. So if you have any questions about the crates or the rod holders, please leave a comment below and I'd be happy to get back to you. Happy kayak fishing!